Buzz, I wanted to ask you about, there was a juncture, I think right after the technical foul, and Vanderbilt was, they had to take out Edwards with 4 fouls. They had their two starting bigs out with 4 fouls for about a 5-minute period. Yet they were able to extend the lead. Just in your mind, how big of a stretch was that, or maybe not at all?
Yes, sir. I remember parts of it. I do remember the technical. I do remember 99 and 22 being in foul trouble. I think whether it was that stretch or almost start to finish, I think we did good things, but too many tangible and intangible things, we didn't hit our ceiling. And that includes me, we have to figure out how to hit our ceiling in the things that we can touch and the things that we can't touch. And there can't be as much inconsistency as there's been over the last 10 days. Is it an outlier stat? Is it this person? Is it that person on the opposing team, on our team? We're just not doing as good a job as we have proven that we can do in those categories, the things that you would ask me from a stat sheet and the things that are important to how we operate. We've just been okay. And in a one-possession game, regardless of opponent, regardless of record, regardless of location, we have to do better. And I have to continue to find ways to execute those things at a much higher efficiency than what we've done the last 10 days.
Do you think of this as a slump or a reason for concern?
Just not the consistency that we have to have in order to be as good as we can be. And you can pick any category, whatever those categories would be, offensively, defensively, on the glass, special teams, late game, how we start, how we come out of ATOs, dead balls, and the things from an intangible standpoint. Our communication, our physicality, our connectedness, all of those things we have to execute at a much higher rate. Whether we play Vanderbilt at home, whether we play at Florida, we can't ride the emotion of the schedule. We can't ride the emotion of the crowd. We have to hold our group more accountable, Buzz at the front of the line, on how can we be better.
Did this feel like a game that, even though it was at home, the guys needed to bring their own energy a little bit more?
We all need to have more energy, and I know energy is not a stat, but from start to finish, energy should not be a point of conversation. That's a prerequisite. Our organization knows that. Our toughness, our physicality, the level at which we communicate, having great emotion but not being emotional, paying attention completely, physically, mentally, and emotionally to the things that we can control, not the things that are out of our control, being able to make adjustments in real time relative to what the game presents on both sides of the ball, and understanding that this is an imperfect game and things are not going to go perfect. And so an intangible is, how do you respond when it didn't go your way, or when there was a failure on your part or your team's part? How do we do a better job?
How do you feel like Pharrell did, being with his aggressiveness, seemingly from the start of this?
I think Gochi played well, and I think other guys played well in certain categories, just all categories. The things that I could talk to you about, and then the things that you guys would say, yeah, there's not a stat on it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Gochi, 4, Buzz, H, everybody, we have to hit our ceiling at a higher rate. And to some degree, I think how we got to this position was not necessarily being the best in any tangible category, but being really good in the intangible categories. And sometimes those intangible categories some of it translates and influences the things that are monitored as a metric, as a stat. And this is not terrible. We scored 1.12 points per possession, but we didn't do well enough on both sides of the ball in the things that count, but also in the things that you can't count, but really do count.
On the last play, what was it about that design that you liked on the lob to Pharrell? And how you're big on special teams, we know that, but how much have y'all practiced that situation particularly recently?
Yeah, we scored. We call that play Minnesota, hence that's where Gochi's from. We've only ran it twice. We're one of two. The first time we ran it, the ball was not deep sideline. It was normal sideline. That changes the angle. And also, from a defensive standpoint, is there more than 0.3 on the clock? Because if there's less than 0.3, you can't even touch it. So similar to what happened at South Carolina the first Saturday of this month, if you play the 3-point line and give them the 2, well, it was the exact opposite in that situation. We can't catch it and shoot it, so just put everybody at the rim. But we didn't have a choice. I thought the 4's shot at the rim was right, and I thought how they defended it was right. And I thought Gochi trying to mangle around amidst all of the bodies and arms, he did a good job.
You guys started fouling quite often, about a minute 30 to go. You got it within 6 a couple times, but you kept fouling. Do you feel like sending them to the free throw line would be more effective to try and come back versus playing defense a whole 30 seconds?
Yeah, from that point forward, or from that point down, we were trying to extend the game. Maybe from the 2.5 minute mark to the 1.5 minute mark, there's some, is it a one possession? It's not a one possession. It was a 2 possession game. Is that 2 possessions? Is it 5 points or 6 points? I'll study it a little bit more on that 2.5 to 1.5. But once it was 1.5 below and you're playing a 2 possession game, we're just trying to lengthen it. I thought some of the execution without burning the last time out in that last 1.5, some of those specials we ran, Zoo to the rim, Zoo acting like he's going to the rim and hitting CJ on the field. I thought some of that was good. You're going to be in these types of games, and so that category of specials, you have to be able to execute. And in some ways, we did a good job. We had the jump ball, telling the officials we're going for the tie-up prior to the foul, and then trying to warn the officials, if we don't get the jump, we are going to trap. When are we going to foul relative to the shot clock? What led to the inadvertent whistle side out of bounds was we're trying to go for the tie-up. And some of the things that we were doing defensively over the last 2.5 minutes, you don't want them to throw it long. You do want them to throw it to the short side. Are you going to trap it? Who is their throw in? Are we going to take that away and give it to the belt? I thought a lot of that was good. So that category, good. Just too many categories from the start to the finish for specials to be good and too many other categories just to be okay. And again, in what we're doing, you're going to have to be better at all of the categories, including specials.
Coach, obviously the messaging for you is important. How you and your team communicate is something you harp on all the time. Is there something that you want to re-harp on here as things get stronger, or is there possibly a new message going down the stretch?
Yeah, I think all of it probably tweaks a little bit with each passing game. I think some of the language we've been using has been received the right way. I think they're aware. I think they understand. They've been mature in how they've received it. But again, the things that we do when we don't see you are really important. The things that we do when we are public, really important. But collectively, we all have to do better. when it's private, and we all have to do better when it's public. And that's what's required. You want to continue to try to improve. It's an outcome-based, result-based industry. We're aware of that, but we're also aware of all of the processes that go into the result. And too many of those processes tonight, publicly, we didn't hit it as well as we have to from an execution standpoint. It's not from a lack of awareness. It's not from a lack of comprehension. We've been, I don't know how many this would have been. That's a bunch of 1 or 2 possession games. So we've had a lot of reps of it, and we teach and coach as if all of them are going to be 1 or 2 possession games. But that doesn't mean that the status quo is good enough. You have to take this information, you have to learn from it. We have to present that information tomorrow prior to beginning the preparation for Florida, so that if this is the situation in Gainesville on Saturday, we're better when this sort of scenario presents itself. And those intangibles are always going to be there. And our program has been built in many ways on those things. And we didn't influence the tangible things enough tonight.
Is there a way to quantify the mental fatigue that goes through that kind of a marathon of an end of the game, and how do you manage that with players?
I think their experience helps. I think that we've been through a bunch of these helps. I think we practice these things probably at as high of a rate as I ever have in my career. You could argue sometimes, Travis, maybe that's not the appropriate approach, because you're going to play 195 games, 195 minutes before this presents itself. So you have to be accountable for the first 195 minutes before. And so our special teams is we want to make more free throws than the opponent attempts. That's one. And then we play out of bounds offense and defense as another one. And then we call them the ATO score. So to start each half, the 16-minute, that'd be 2 of them, that's 4, 12, 6, 8, 2 more. In the Tennessee game, I believe that Texas A&M called 3 timeouts, and Tennessee, I believe, called 2 timeouts. So add those 5, and we play down back, no matter whose ball it is. At halftime, it was 11. We had 11 free throws. I think they had 9. No, they had 7 maybe. We were ATO score. We had scored 3 points. They had scored 4. We were -1. But sometimes the out of bounds and the ATO, they bleed into one another. And again, some of those things were good. But on the ATO, we scored 0.6 offensively. That's not good. And ATO defensively, they scored 0.8. That's really good. But in the Tennessee game, I can't tell you now because I haven't studied it. In the Tennessee game, 20% of the possessions were coming out of an ATO, which is a large percentage. And so we practice those ATOs, and we also study the frequency at which the opponent, what are their most common actions in those situations. So again, I think our plan is accurate. I think our organization is aware of the plan. The execution of the plan in the things that are metrically a part of it and the things that we count as metrics, we just are not doing those things as effective and as efficient as you have to going into March, and we have to change that.
Buzz, I wanted to ask you about the timeouts you took. It was about 6 minutes into the first half. They were on I think a 15-2 run.
Yes.
You took a timeout and
Yes.
responded.
Yeah, we did fine.
So what was the message there? What was the strategy, if you can?
I think in the first half, Olin, we ended up with 3 turkeys. We had 1 turkey in the second ATO, and then we ended up getting number 2 and 3 over post that timeout. But in that stretch there, we weren't getting consecutive stops, and we called 3 stops in a row. As you guys know, we call a turkey, and we call 3 scores in a row a heat, like you're hot. We weren't approaching any level of turkey, and we weren't approaching any level of heat. And I think the timeout was right. Our response was right. And for it to be a 1-possession game at halftime, we probably managed that defensively and offensively after that better.
Did y'all make a point to go inside more, or it just seemed that way, but I don't know if that was.
So without explaining everything, if the clock is running, we're trying to do these things. So there's no confusion. And if the clock is stopped, then we're going to do these things. And that's another thing that we chart. If the clock is stopped, it could be an ATO, it could be an out of bounds, it could be a free throw, but it could also just be the clock is stopped, and we're gonna choose from, so to say, this category of plays. Sometimes that roster management trumps what we're trying to do, which is a good thing. And I think we did a good job in some of that. We just didn't do good enough. And credit Vanderbilt, huge win on Saturday, and huge win for their program. Coach has done an amazing job, and so I don't want to say, look, we just were bad. They were a part of making us not good enough, and credit should go to them. And I should have said that to start.
Finish this off. Buzz, is there any common denominator when there's another guy kind of getting hot from 3? It seems like it's been a trend lately with Tennessee and today with Nickel.
Yeah, we've brought some new words and new language to that with number 2, with number 5. We have had probably the appropriate amount of language. It started in Starkville. It's Josh Hubbard, number 15. I'm sorry I said his name. That's number 12. And then we fouled him at too high of a rate. And then we were aware of 2, and we were aware of 5 versus Tennessee. After 22 points in the first half, we amplified those changes a little bit more and did a better job prior to the side out of bounds from 30 feet. And then we devised new language, new clips, new metrics going into this game, and we didn't execute those things well enough. We were twirling around unaware too often. They had made 8 threes or more in their 6 SEC wins entering tonight. Included in those games that they won, they had also scored 16 second chance points. That doesn't necessarily mean that they scored them right away off an offensive rebound. That also could mean they pitched it out similar to what we do for a dagger and hit a 3. Just okay. I think at halftime they had scored 34 points, and 21 of those 34 had come from the players that we had given special consideration to. And so that would be one internal/external category that we have to improve on. So 5 made 7 threes. That's great. And they scored 36 out of 86 from the 2 guys that we had given special consideration to. And that special consideration they're deserving of. And it's not a player at Texas A&M or a coach at Texas A&M. The awareness when we words we use, when we create new words, we have to be able to execute better.